Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Boris Mann. You can find me on Blue Sky at bman.ca. I am an independent App Protocol fan, and I'm running the appprotocol.dev account. We tend to have tech talks most Thursdays, and they're announced and published on the Ghost website at appprotocol.dev. If you sign up there, you can subscribe by email, and you'll get notifications of new talks. But we always post about it to the Blue Sky account as well. Next week, and I'll publish right after this call, we've got Trezi, who's going to come on and talk about the games industry labeler, which I think is a really good example of onboarding and supporting a community, including doing some interesting things with verification manually at this point. I think Chad's on the call. Chad, do you want to give a wave? Chad is joining to help out and get a Japanese-friendly time slot with the Whitewind developer. We don't have that scheduled yet, and generally open to other talks, whether we do them ad hoc or on a regular Tech Talk schedule. So please do get in touch if you're interested in that. And I will stop sharing if I remember how to do that. And I will hand it over to Rudy for today's talk.
Dope. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Dope. Get this little setup. Get the chat open. All right, cool. Yeah, so thanks everyone for joining today. This will be a talk covering my project, Blacksky. And really, I feel like I talk a lot about the community building aspect about Blacksky a lot on the Skyline, but this is an opportunity to kind of talk about the technical pieces that go behind it, and then just like what it's like operating and running all the stuff and experimenting with the app protocol that I always thought was super cool and interesting from the beginning. Cool. So yeah, Blacksky algorithms. That is kind of the way I do that, just distinction between Blacksky community and the folks like making that community work. And this little tagline was always a tagline from the beginning with building the Black social layer for the decentralized web. And the TLDR on that is because of that protocol, I think a really cool thing to do is like not only be building just like the next like Black owned app version of something, but really build like infrastructure that could extend across different apps. So as people start building these different apps, there's this community that can go along with it. People always talk about with app protocol, you own your identity and your data, but then it's like, what if you can also maintain those community connections along the way too? So that's kind of been the goal with Blacksky. So a little bit about me. Before Blacksky, I was in the IT world. I was at the last like full-time employee role I had was as an IT executive with this B2B SaaS startup. But what pays the bills as well is Salesforce architecting and IT architecting. I launched Blacksky. Pretty much, I got into Blue Sky off of the beta waitlist. Yeah, off the beta waitlist. Didn't get an invite, got it off that. And when I joined, the ecosystem was super rough. There was like a Matrix server, the Discord, the API touches Discord. I don't think that was up yet or nothing. Uh, I think one of the first questions I asked was the question that gets asked a lot now is like, is this really decentralized? Um, but I had like that kind of like Web3-esque background, so that's also probably what got me interested. Um, and yeah, and Blacksky, I've started to preface this a lot now, but Blacksky is the biggest and most public thing that I've ever worked on. And it is also really the first time I worked in open source. So getting really familiar with collaborating with other people, something I'd still would like to do and I haven't done yet, but also just been super busy. So like I'd like to contribute to like the core at Proto repo. Probably where I'd end up doing that at is at Ozone because Ozone has been such a pain point for me, and I don't think Ozone has gotten as much love from the ecosystem, and would like to help out with that. And yeah, because sometimes people ask me why I work on stuff, honestly, I think it's cool, but the reason behind thinking it's cool is I think community networks are cool. And so I do a few different projects like this. I have a project called Paper Tree that helps people like collectively pool funds. I'm a mutual aid organizer with this group called We the People NYC. We distribute food and clothing in Bed-Stuy and Harlem, both Black neighborhoods in New York, if you're unfamiliar, every week. And while Black Sky has trended up since the election, We the People has also trended up since the election. So it's been really cool seeing people just like want to get active and really focus on these networks. And Pact, which is a nonprofit that fiscally hosts a bunch of mutual aid groups in New York, and I'm on the board of. Cool. So yeah, so Black Sky is creating a safe space for Black community building and doing that through custom feeds, context-aware content moderation, and other tooling. I think someone needs to mute. Thank you. So yeah, so really wanting to create a safe space for folks to build community. So that's through the custom feeds that aggregate the content, which lots of people are tuning into using the hashtag Black Sky or hashtag add to Black Sky tags. And then wanting to create like, you know, it's not, especially in the early days when there were not many Black users, there's not many of these like community safety tools. So, I mean, I'll get into ozone, but I think it's really cool to be able to run your own moderation service and just like be it's not a whole different app, you know, like people can, wherever they see on Blue Sky some anti-Black content, they could just report it to Black Sky. And we're likely to respond to it quicker than the Blue Sky team because Blue Skies, they're overwhelmed in general, but also like they may not have um, the context to understand like why something should be hidden and not even seen by certain people. Cool. So this is like really high level operating Black Sky. As everyone pointed out, like the Blue Sky overall has been trending, but in this particular migration, this has really been good it's been particularly with like Black Twitter migrating over. And there's been lots of conversations over there. Black Sky usually follows the growth curve of Blue Sky. I feel like it's like usually about like some percentage, like 0.4% or something of like users of Blue Sky are using Black Sky. But there was a really sharp increase with this because it was specific to Black Twitter. So there's been a 600% increase in traffic. Yesterday was the highest. This was taken at 2 a.m. This morning because I've also been running on just a couple hours of sleep for the whole last week. But yesterday there was 315K views, and like at 2 a.m. there was already almost 250K views. I haven't looked at it today. And I think I've seen conversations people have had around tracking usage of things. I mean, I find it super helpful, especially just to also even understand like why something's crashing. It's like, oh, because like lots of people are viewing it right now. But the original visitor tracking that I started doing was started from I think very early on. So like the first version of Black Sky, the custom feed was the first thing I did with Black Sky was build the custom feed. And the first version of that was the TypeScript kind of copy that was done. And that was just a list. Like it was like dids in like hard coded in the in the code. And that it just didn't scale super well, obviously. Um, and then when I moved over to like a Rust implementation, did that from scratch, I felt like this was opportunity to just start getting more control over the experience of it and do more interesting things. And like within, I think Black Sky, the TypeScript version launched in May 2023, end of May. By July, we were already kind of getting harassed. So there was a need to create a way to stop people from viewing the feed. And so, you know, at that time, I think it was really early and there weren't many personalized feeds besides Discover. And there, once I think we found out that the way that personalized feeds worked was that when you open a feed in Blue Sky, the app view proxies that request to whatever Feedgen server is out there that's hosted. Um, and it sends over your did in a JSON web token. That's what it's called. I forget. JOT. It sends that over in a JOT. And the original intention was just to like know who's viewing the feed, so I could say you can't view the feed. And so that launched in like July. And that was inspired by like the mechanism to do that, because it's like it checks to see, it parses the JOT, and then it sees if you're on a banned list, and then it shows a message. It just shows one post instead of going and fetching posts from the database. Uh, and this also assumes that you understand how feeds work and all that stuff. But it goes in and it was inspired because I think Retroid or Jazz, I forget which of them did it first, but they had built a way so that if your feed was down, which happened a lot, I feel like for folks early on, it would instead of showing the generic like pipe through network error people see, it would show a post. And so I was like, oh, like if you could do something like that, and then you combine the like show one post instead of getting all the posts the feed would normally show, and you combine that with personalizing it based on who's viewing the feed, and then you're like use that as a kind of safety mechanism. So if you shouldn't be viewing the feed, show this one message. That was kind of the thought process behind that. And yeah, so this is just the total visits is all time since starting with the Rust version. It doesn't have the original TypeScript version. And the unique visitors is the unique on did on who's visiting. Cool. The other dashboard that I look at, let me also check the
Just a quick question
chat.
from Raphael saying that those from the previous slide, the 315K visits are basically to the Blacksky feed homepage profile.
Any of the feeds, yeah. There's Blacksky, there's Blackademics, and then there's Blacksky trending. So it's anytime someone loads or refreshes one of those. Cool. Cool. All right. And then, oh, someone dropped the Pack Collective, Open Collective. Oh, thank you. So yeah, so then the other dashboard that I look at is the moderation dashboard. And so this is new. This is since launching Ozone. So another thing that I did when launching Ozone for Blacksky, I waited a while. Like I watched how all the different stuff went down with the different labelers and saw how that evolved. And I really wanted to. I knew it would blow up as soon as I did it, and so I wanted to be ready, like really like in just my life, be able to do it. And so yeah, we launched that in the last month. And the default Ozone service, I think comes with, it's like Caddy, which I still don't exactly know what Caddy is, but Caddy, Ozone, and then a Postgres instance. And I'm already spending a lot on all these different services like a Feedgen, a read-only Postgres, the write Postgres, the PDS server for testing, the Firehose consumer on a droplet, now an Ozone instance. I didn't want to like add on another Postgres database, so I have it all. I changed the configuration for the Docker deployment for Ozone to point to my existing Postgres instance, basically. So it's all out of one database. Long story short. And yeah, actually, I took it was actually this was right before the last big influx of users when I launched it, and it was just because someone tagged me and like literally at me and was like, what is Blacksky, black idiots, like some MAGA-esque message. And I was just like, I don't know if Blue Sky is going to respond to this, but I want this out of my mentions immediately. And so then I went and like rolled out Ozone, which has been a really, there's lots of interesting things there. This is a more technical talk, but it has been interesting providing moderation. But so this is the dashboard. You can see in the last week, there's been a sharp uptick in uh, reports to the feed. Um, the more recent ones, I will say, have been that there's an interesting thing that I found. There's no reporting that comes out of ozone. I should mention that. Ozone again is the like tool that you can use to run a labeler and have people send moderation reports to you. But it's really bare bones. It like you can see a queue of stuff to label, and that's like about it. And you can label this stuff. But there's no reporting out of it. So I wanted that to be able to look at stuff like this and see things are trending up. And then I wanted a way to view because there are people you can't set who can report stuff to you. Uh,
Mm,
so you can set your labels, but people can still send, like I have a label for misogynoir and anti-black harassment, but there people send me labels for like send reports for spam. I guess maybe I don't know if they think that I'm also labeling them. I don't know if they just have all their moderation services checked when they send in the reports. I don't know why, but that's the distinction between labeled and acknowledged and only acknowledged. So if it's only acknowledged, it's probably something that we wouldn't label, and so we're just going to acknowledge it. It doesn't even apply to us. 99% of the times it's that. A very small percent of the times it's like maybe we could have labeled it, but we are just going to acknowledge it. But a lot of that green on that screen and the pie chart is stuff that probably we shouldn't even be receiving. And yeah, then they're just like a little table of the kind of stuff. So you can see the comments that come in through this. Ozone also has a really interesting data structure that made some of these queries kind of tricky. But
Drew,
yeah.
Drew has a
Mhm,
question. Who hasn't used ozone? I think
mhm.
probably most of the people on this call haven't that. So it like even just looking that would be interesting. Can you
Or
easily invite other moderators to the instance? And how many people do you typically have handling your queue?
yes. Um, Da, 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 da. Yes, you can add other moderators. So I have one other community moderator that I brought on specifically for the election. I
Right.
don't know why this isn't loading. Um, that's actually kind of concerning.
There's chats in the back channel that um, Blue Sky may be
Is down.
down-ish. Fail,
Sensational.
fail butterfly.
Sensational. Okay, yeah, that's the other thing with this. So there's funny stuff with ozone. Okay, here you go.
Totally loaded.
Uh,
Totally works from an
and so
hour
you
ago.
can see I'm gonna scroll because a lot of the ones that end up getting taken down are just like I don't want to really be sharing a bunch of people's information like that. But this is the queue, and you can kind of see the little triangles are escalated. Green is resolved. Yellow is still open to be done. Um, but yeah, you can kind of go through that, and everyone sees the same view. So I don't even know that you can really like do permissions or anything. Again, it's not really robust. So I don't know if you could say like people only see these kinds of reports or anything like that. Go ahead, of
Does it
course.
use an app protocol account or is it a separate um, account for
Yeah,
these
you log
moderators?
in you log in with your own account and the guide for ozone says it recommends to like not use for a couple of reasons not use the same account you use just to like make posts and stuff because you're going to be clicking into viewing certain content. You may accidentally follow someone that's giving away that you're doing the moderation.
Mm,
So the person who's helping me with moderation, they log in from an alt account. um, I think you also have to use your real password. I don't think you can use app passwords for logging in.
so it's not OAuth
uh,
enabled yet.
no, no. Also, I saw there's a open issue in the repo. When you log into Ozone, it says like Blue Sky mod tools, and like Brian put in a thing that it should be like app protocol mod tools because it should work for other apps. Like you should be able to do
Yeah.
moderation for other apps. Um, so yeah, da, 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 da. So yeah, people can so we all share the same queue. So I have one person who's doing moderation now. There's another person that I'd like to be onboarding soon. And there is there's a bunch of people who have asked to do moderation, but I'll get to this a little bit later. I think there's lots of considerations to doing moderation. And this is also a really like again, like we're running a labeler that labels anti-black content and we are black. So we are encountering the same, like we're just taking on all the hateful content to hide it from other people. Like day one, it was Haitian migrants, Haitian immigrants, and like the stuff that Donald Trump says. Day two was the N-word slur with a image of George Floyd getting killed. Like it's pretty heavy stuff. Um, and so yeah, people should be aware of that. And there's honestly, I'd have some recommendations for ways to make it easier for people. And then there's tooling that I'd like to build. So it's also I have some ideas around that, but I'll get to that a little bit later on. But this is just like the two dashboards I look at in the day. How's how are we growing? What is the high level of like what's going on moderation wise? So then I know like, oh, some interesting things around here is like, how do you address capacity for like, can one person handle 50 moderation reports? I think that's a lot for one person. When I spoke to other moderators, they say like maybe like 10 to 15, depends on the platform you're on, et cetera. But we're definitely at a place where more than one person should be moderating, maybe even two or three. Uh, word. And I want to make some things I think could be automated with that. All right, so risky. So risk, yeah, not our sky. Risky. Because I think there is an R sky that's like for the like some SDK for the R programming language. So R sky was kind of taken already, but I wanted, yeah, risky because it's just a little bit edgy. It's close to Rust, phonetically to me. But it's supposed to be an app protocol implementation built in Rust. Most of the code is supposed to be general, so it's supposed to be like the app proto library, but some like risky Feedgen is meant to be for like it has like code specific to Blacksky. Uh, and I wanted the code for Blacksky to be like open source to yeah, so originally it was just so people could kind of see how it would work, but uh and yeah, it's been I think there's people who are like starting to like adapt the feed gen to their use cases. And then it closely follows the structure of the TypeScript implementation because yeah, I found out it was easier for when I was developing things to just like be able to like this is it in TypeScript, let me translate it to Rust. And then if you're new to it, I can always just like you probably looked at the TypeScript implementation first, so I can easily point you to where that would be in Rust. There are differences, but it tries. That's my recommendation, especially to when people do contributions, like, try to make it closer to the TypeScript implementation. Lexicon. So the app proto lexicon is JSON. I just didn't do that. It's like lexicon in spirit in that it's a library that like shares the like definitions of the objects across um all of the different libraries that I implement for Risky, but it is not the exact like JSON lexicon structure. Um, the other thing that I found, I'll a lot with this talk is I'll talk about stuff that's worked and then I'll talk about the challenges I've had. Uh, One of the things that was confusing was the difference between app proto slash lexicons, which is the lexicon definitions, app proto packages slash lexicon, which I think is like a lexicon validation library, and then the lexicon uh, like module within the PDS, which I think is like I actually can't exactly describe it. It tries to like convert the JSON into objects, basically. Um, and I forget off the top of my head like why it what it uses that for. There's like one thing that I use it for in Risky, which I did using the thing with that is I converted it from JSON to TOML, which is like the configuration language used in Rust. Uh, and then there's like a macro that converts the TOML into objects. Or yeah, I think there's that or some thing that I ran that converted into objects. Which is why Risky is like 100,000 plus lines of code, but like 30,000 of that is like auto generated from doing that. All right. This actually, I hope we're making good time. So the feed gen, so the technical pieces of it. So I have again this I mentioned that Risky is my real first foray into like open source and like public project and stuff. It's also really like my first Rust project. I just thought Rust was cool. It's not like a language that I learned a long time ago. Someone very snarkily on like a Lemmy post was like talking about like how old the code is, and it's not old. I guess Stack Overflow responses are old for certain things, and so I use some libraries that maybe not up to the current Rust trends, but it works. Uh, there are things that I think I've learned from doing. Oh, heavy on what you said, Will. Nobody understands how messed up moderation is on a big scale until they do it. Yeah, heavy on that. But yeah, some of the libraries I've used, I think I wouldn't use them again for various reasons. Rocket, I'll talk about limitations with that. That's a web server in Rust. That was tricky to, it's fine for the feed gen. It was harder for the PDS to use. Um, the Diesel ORM was okay. I've also spoke with another person who's like using Rust in the app proto ecosystem. They also don't like Diesel. Uh, I also it's funny working with open source projects because you'll run into an error and then they'll be like, join this chat room to ask questions. And then the like maintainer can be very curmudgeony and like, well, you shouldn't even be trying to do that thing with my thing. And it's like, well, I used your thing for like 95% of the code and I just needed to like do this other thing. Uh, one of the to be specific with Diesel, like there's a lot of code that I think it's a pretty common concept of you do like a builder. So you say like builder equals um like you add the post dot filter, whatever the case may be, and then you save that as a variable and then you may pass that to another function. That's really hard to do with Diesel. Also because I guess it's like you have to be really specific about the types and it's not really friendly about the different variations you may want to do. But yeah, Diesel's tricky. Postgres backend, write and read only. I feel like there's optimizations I can do on the feed for like reading posts, especially because that's what got really expensive in the last few days with the uptick in traffic. Um, but yeah, and this is like an API server. I should have probably put the Firehose consumer first since that's really where stuff starts. But the feed gen both responds to people's posts with the different algorithms, the get all posts or get trending posts, but it also is what writes the data to the database too. So it has an API endpoint and it writes the likes and follows and visits and images and videos and the per community membership uh, that happens. And so some of the cool things that are specific about um the like Blacksky risky feed gen implementation is banned from TV. That's the one that which I want to make it more scalable because it requires me to change the code. It's pretty hard coded right now. Which is also kind of like some public shaming, but that's what controls stopping people from viewing the feed. It's really like 20 people that ever got on there, but you have to do something really bad to end up there. Uh, this is the logic that when people use hashtag add to black sky or hashtag remove from black sky, this is in that code is where it's like looking at that. Um, once upon a time for older blue sky users, this is it also like ignores health thread. Or once upon it, when health thread mattered, it would ignore health thread. um, and something I recently added because someone once at like 3 a.m. someone used they used the hashtag black sky tag and they added another tag that was like n-word sky. Um, and so I already have filters like these auto moderation rule scripts that run. I think I mentioned that probably like yeah, like the next one. But someone said that should where the fuck is the moderation? That shouldn't have even gotten through. Which understood. Things are scaling. I get the premise. Or I get the sentiment, especially being someone who would be affected by that. So something I added in the last few days is an explicit slur filter. So I copied the logic that also deep blue sky lore of the person who like added created a username with the N-word in their handle. That code that was used to prevent that from happening again, I adapted that into Rust and put it in the Feedgen so that you can't use any of the tags that would get you into Black Sky while also using that slur. And then what I'd like to do eventually, I posted this in the Discord, but I haven't, I don't know how people have done it, is like I want to automatically send reports to my ozone instance. So if someone used these slurs, like I want to auto label it. So that's something I'd like to do in the future. Right now, it just prints a line that someone used that slur. And I also had to adapt it because that's the slur detector. I know there's like the Scunthorpe problem, which is like, text containing certain words, like when to actually use it. There's a whole reclaim slur. By the way, my philosophy and a lot of folks' philosophies is that there is no reclaiming the hard R. No one can use that. Like whether you're black or not, you probably shouldn't be using it. So that's why it's like no matter what you do, like having that slur, it's not going to get posted to the feed. Um, and especially in a public platform like Blue Sky, I would say. Uh, and what was I going to get at? Yeah, so the Scunthorpe problem. So the regex that's used to detect that slur right now does not do it if there's a suffix or a prefix or if it's like within a word. So snigger would not get labeled or caught. Um, but and this person they added a suffix. It was N-word sky. So I also had to update the regex to catch that suffix or any suffix that people add to it. Um, word. And then sponsored post. I kind of did this as kind of a cheeky thing because people kept saying you couldn't do ads, and I kind of wanted to like just prove that you could do something like an ad. And then like if you were to do something like an ad, how could it work and what could be a good use of that? So Black Sky runs is open source, fiscally hosted by a nonprofit. It relies on donations. So point zero like 0.1% of the time randomly if the environment variable is checked, it will insert a sponsored post, but it's the donation request post into the feed and replace a post that's already there.
Rudy, I gotta say, like, you're spitting so much fire. Everything from Blue Sky Elder lore to like, oh, by the way, I casually implemented custom sponsored feeds already. Booyah! Like that alone is a really interesting piece. That like we'll make sure that we share, including the part. I will drop the link to Open Collective again. This is something that Rudy and the Black Sky team could use support from in continuing to build. Because despite all your infrastructure costs, the really expensive part is paying humans.
Yes, yes. And I believe in
So
paying people for moderation, especially.
yeah.
It's a shitty job. And yeah, so I definitely believe in that. So yeah, thank
Anyway,
you.
I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah,
It's great. Keep
yeah,
keep
yeah, yeah.
keep going.
So with this, yeah, with the sponsored posts, yeah, I wanted to do it specifically for like, so because there's earlier this year, I think I was in a workshop for a decentralized social web workshop, and people from like Noster devs were there, like I think I don't know if a Farcaster, Mastodon folks, Activity Pub, and then it was like me and Brian for like
In
for this.
Princeton.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The Princeton Dev Workshop. Um, and folks, at one point, there was a conversation about how do we make like decentralized web sustainable? And I still don't have an answer for like how to do that, obviously, but donations is the way that it feels good to me. And so it's just like, why not just use that tool that people are like, oh, you can monetize using ads. And it's like, why not just advertise your donation? So that was the thought process. Oh, also the per membership per community thing that'll come back to that later. That's like an idea I've posted about that I kind of people have started asking me like can they use something like Risky to host their community and they're not devs and so um for some people I may host it for them like their feed definition will just point to like a Risky instance the original instance Uh, but then I'd like to make a front end. There's a few different reasons why a front end would be good. So really quickly, curation is moderation. So there's we talked about ozone and like getting reports. That's reactive moderation. What I spend a lot of my time doing is proactive moderation on the feed. So I consider it curation as moderation. Uh, so it's like, what do you show to people and what are you amplifying? So that's where there's like a little Python script that just runs a bunch of different rules and deletes posts regularly. So if someone used the N word before the explicit filter was there, like that post got removed after like the it runs every minute. I could make it run even more because the skyline's moving so fast now. Uh, but yeah, that post got removed. Self harm, Wordle posts, uh, any just stuff that is off topic, get it out of the feed. Because and this was also like an important thing because people were like, "Oh, is Blacksky just a list?" And there's 20 different reasons why it could not just be a list. But uh, another one of those is it's not just all of your content. Like even if you're in the feed, like it is it's gonna remove certain things. And yeah, helps to cultivate a vibe is kind of the goal. Makes people feel good. And also, it's one of those like I would insert a little slide in there of like ethical considerations that I think Andrew talked about with the news feed. Is like once you have like 500,000 people like viewing your feed, like there's some kind of obligation or like what do you choose to amplify and allow to propagate through you? Um, so weird. All right, Firehose consumer. Still on the protocol relay. Haven't made my way to Jetstream. I know Jazz is very much Jetstream, Jetstream, Jetstream. Uh, I may do that, but it's like there's just I literally just don't have time right now. Yeah, PRs are welcome. And I don't know, like it hasn't really caused a problem for me. I also like, yeah, I haven't run into, I don't like my consumer doesn't like drop the fire hose. It doesn't fall behind. It doesn't eat up so much CPU for the resources I have. So I just haven't had a reason to do it. But I get that it feels like it's kind of the like new wave. So I'll get on that eventually. And yeah, the fire hose does not save to the database. It just sends a request to the Feedgen. So it's just like pull data, push data, pull data, push data. It doesn't actually save anything down. Um, and yeah, so like I think some people combine the because the original implementation for a Feedgen combined both the consumer and the like saving of the data and serving the posts. And so yeah, I separate the two. Um, and yeah, there's just this note that like with a lot of the ethos that I've had is like I've moved Blacksky multiple times over the last like year and a half. Like it started on Heroku, then I went over to Render, then DigitalOcean. I have like AWS credits. I just basically go wherever it's cheapest and or could be free for me is essentially it. And so it's important for me to be able to like pick and choose where those things are and maybe have them in two different places and easily be able to move them without disrupting. Or I could like, spin down. Yeah, you get the idea. Cool. So probably the like heaviest, trickiest, and like least, it's also least finished, and least stable is the PDS implementation. So when asked, I use Brian's reference of like what is in a PDS and what counts as a full PDS implementation. Um, I think Risky PDS right now is the furthest along Rust implementation, PDS implementation at least. Um, and it has a lot of this. The stuff that it doesn't have really is, or A, it's still buggy. So there's that. It has stuff built, but I'm still working through actually testing it and making sure that it will work correctly. The other thing is I don't have OAuth yet. What has been super tricky is I've worked on the PDS now. It feels, yeah, I worked on the PDS for a year. And what has been considered a PDS has literally changed like every 2 months since I started. Uh, like literally every 2 months. And so now OAuth is a part of it. I don't have OAuth yet. There is this stuff with some of the headers that changed. Uh, But I thought a PDS implementation when I started it was really cool too, that I don't think a lot of people realize, but like before the app view, Blue Sky was just a PDS. It was just a PDS and a client. And so the way I thought of it is like, oh, you build a PDS implementation, then you basically like you have the whole back end of a social media app, and then you just need the front end. That architecture has changed over time. I feel like it's kind of an intentional thing to take like less, it's kind of just like nerf a PDS to like not make it like so important in the overall architecture. At least that's the vibe I get. But yeah, so you do account lifecycle, it stores your passwords, it pushes out the events that you do, it stores the actual like repo structure. Um, it handles is what I would say blobs because there's different I think I have it on the other slide. Go back to the slide. Yeah, so the differences between the some of the main differences between the TypeScript implementation and risky PDS is that using Postgres instead of SQLite. Another thing is there's like I mentioned in the next slide, but like the TypeScript implementation I think does per actor databases, like per actor stores, and I just use
Yeah.
like a universal one with a did as like just another column in it. I forget. I think there was something about people not deduplicating blocks. I forget the exact reason why people had it separate, but uh, I do the opposite of that. S3 compatible blob storage again because I have DigitalOcean credits, and so and because I want to be able to like not have stuff just like on disk. Um, and then yeah, it's cloud services. So basically, like instead of doing on disk SQLite stores using Postgres, instead of doing on disk blob storage, use S3. And instead of, I think there's like a mail server that's a part of the PDS, so use Mailgun instead of that. And it's all just to make the PDS easier to migrate because, as I mentioned, I moved everything I've built like 5 to 6 times, and we'll keep doing that because DO is not giving me these credits. So some of the things I think are non-obvious, especially when talking to people about who want to start building a PDS, is half like most of the time the PDS isn't even actually doing the operations like in like a repo operation or uh like now updating your password or something or whatever. It's just proxying requests to Blue Sky for either app.bsky endpoints or chat.bsky endpoints. There's tons. If you ever open the like console, your network, your browser console, the tools, like you'll just see tons of requests going through for chat.bsky. Um,
And that's
and
basically the chat stuff is not currently protocol based, so that's the
mhm,
private messaging is all handled by Blue Sky right now.
yep, exactly. And app.bsky is all the app view things, so like get timeline, etc. Um, there is an AWS implementation in the app proto repo, but it's not used. So one of the things that was tricky for me was like figuring out how to actually make the AWS implementation work uh, with my code, basically. Wasn't obvious to me that each repo has its own data store. I mentioned in the next slide that like there's also that structure of like there's an actor store folder and then there's readers and transactors. It was just really tricky for me to understand how to move that over to what I had going on. And probably best practice, but AppProto breaks up a lot of different things into a lot of different libraries. Like there's like an XRPC server, like package. There's like a common package, then a common web package, and it just has like kind of like functions you'd use across each of them. Uh, I basically for the most part, I've just if I'm only using it for the PDS, I'm just gonna stuff it as a module into the PDS. I'm not gonna like I made risky crypto. I made obviously there's risky lexicon for all of them. Identity is another one that I did for resolving handles and did documents. So I've done a couple, and yeah, risky crypto for like signing stuff. But for the most part, I've kept it. If it's like XRPC server, I just have that as a package in the PDS. So challenges, there are a lot. Probably don't need to get into all these in details, but yeah, the Merkle search tree structure. I'm a self-taught programmer for the most part, uh, and I have never come across tree like data structures before. Also, I hate recursion from the bottom of my heart, and so yeah, Merkle search tree just have both of those in it, and Seaboard. Um, and so it's just like it really was a mystery to me for a long time of like how it's worked. And what's actually even after, because a lot of the stuff that I did was just translate like this is how it would work in Rust, and then like this is the TypeScript, this is Rust, just translate it over. Um, it wasn't until like testing that I really start getting like a mental model for how the Merkle search tree works, which is start and like trying to debug why my testing wasn't working. Um, of which there is still some unknowns there, like how pointers work and outdated pointers. So basically, the Merkle search tree uh, is how the repo and the data is structured. And I can't give you a super great explanation of this, but the leaves are like pointers that are supposed to be like representing the data. Um, I'm gonna botch this, guys, but my issue ends up being like as the tree gets mutated, um, the pointers I think are supposed to change. That's an issue. That's a piece where I'm not always clear on. But basically, like as the tree gets mutated, I used to run into these issues where uh, I would when I would test it, I would expect the pointer to be something, a certain value, and then I would find that it wasn't changed. And so I've had like some issues. Like I've just had issues with pointers. Um, Also testing. If you check out the risky PDS issues list, um, I think I've had issues where basically just it takes as more records are added to the tree, it takes way longer to do any operation on the tree. And I'm pretty sure the tree is supposed to be fast no matter how many that you add. And so yeah, something is broken there that still needs to be figured out. Seaboard was tricky because there's just like three different Seaboard libraries like in Rust. And I someone called me out on that. It's like, which one are you supposed to use? And I'm kind of like, I don't know. Sometimes when I use this one, it works. Sometimes when I use this other one, it doesn't work. Um, and I think there's like difference. I think the issue there comes down to like something with like DAG, Seaboard, and um, yeah,
Yeah, a lot of
and
this
like the
came out of
blocks.
the IPFS ecosystem, which is actually quite old. So some of it is literally even just like the age of it. I mean, a lot of the initial IPFS stuff was written in old versions of Golang.
Mm,
Anyway, so it's not just you,
mhm.
and lots of people are using it in other contexts. And yeah, needs to improve a little. Nick, have did you write your own?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
I, for what it's worth, all of the like the IRO, the DAG CBOR, the IP FS IPLD libraries, I ended up and the OAuth crypto stuff using just rusty crypto libraries in Serde, ended up just deleting all of it and then just writing some minimal stuff to work. If you're ever curious and want to, outside of this, walk through it, I'd be
uh,
glad to share it. But it's hot garbage, so just FYI.
it's tough. It's tough. Also deep. There's just like yeah little nitpicks with the whole how testing and building that stuff has been. Signing was tricky. Just I think that was one of my first victories was just like getting something that signed and was like accepted to be the signature because there's like there's like a way that you're supposed to compress the signatures. Again, cryptography, not a super deep expert on that. So there was, but yeah, that was one of the early ones. Pipe through was difficult. So again, half the time it's doing proxies to the app view um or yeah, I mean the app view for API.bsky, chat.bsky. Rocket is very opinionated, and so is the maintainer of it, that like you shouldn't be directly handling the request, like the raw headers and the raw request body, which is necessary for pipe through. And so like, and pipe through is literally just like you take whatever the request that the person sent you to your PDS, because everything comes through your PDS first before it goes to the rest of the network. And then you modify or add some of the headers. I forget the exact thing. And then you're supposed to just forward that to whatever endpoint it's supposed to go to. And yeah, there was just like a lot of custom stuff that I had to, and I feel like hacky things that I did to make that work. But yeah, it was just to get the body of the data. And it was like, this is also the most I've handled like literal bytes. Like I've spent a lot of time just looking at bytes, and that has been less so fun. Oh, there's a cool tool that is just helpful if it's helpful for anyone else. Is it seaboard.me? Yes, I use this a lot to just like paste in the bytes in hex and then translate it to see what it's supposed to look like, see what the tree looks like. And that has helped me do things where I found, yeah, I was just like, I was with CIDs, there's like, I forget what you call it, but like the first couple bytes are supposed to be like tagged in a certain way. And so like by using this, I was able to find when I wasn't tagging something correctly. Cool. Also, Boris, how are we on time? Are we going till 12:30 or 1:30?
We have the time that you want, so
Okay.
we're good. We're coming up on
Okay.
10. I know some people have to drop. Yes, this is recorded and it will be posted afterwards. Please do, if you have questions, get them in as well so that we can get them while Rudy is live too.
Cool. Yes, like multi-base, but then there's I forget there's that tagging, and then there's another one. I forget what it is. But like the code for like CID is like 42 or something like that. Cool. Deadlocks, that's just a me thing, having to figure it out. Because the sequencer, so like you as you push out events to the network, or like when people are subscribing to WebSockets to your PDS, because that's what the relay does, right? The relay is pulling information from your PDS. So you have to have a WebSocket endpoint that it can pull that data from, and that's in a certain format. And it was just really complicated to do the handle a server that is supposed to, you can create a record on, it's going to save that record to the database, and then the sequencer is listening for changes to the database, and then that queues up it creates a queue of records that would come out the sequencer. And I was trying to do that logic. I was encountering deadlocks pretty often. And then, yeah, just like some differences between the main code and what's its name? The canonical code and my code, and just like finding that there are different response times for things. Car files in general, that's something I'm still trying to understand a little bit more about, but I copied the logic of adenosine, which was Brian Newbold's PDS implementation, like very early PDS implementation, using IRO's early not the current version of IRO, but what they call Beetles, like their legacy version. So using that code. And then just like end-to-end testing is something that's been tricky to figure out, which is like, I have a PDS instance, and how do I just test this stuff works? Like, how do I know the relay is picking up my code? When I found that the relay is picking up my code, how do I make sure the app view is accepting the stuff from the relay? And then like what kind of records is the client creating and what kind of requests are the client sending through. So just doing that end-to-end testing has been really, really challenging. I end up running the Big Sky, the Go implementation of the relay locally, but I haven't figured out like also running an app view and also doing a client or anything like that. So yeah, that has made development pretty slow. And we're basically close to the end of this. But yeah, mod tooling. So I recently participated in a content moderation study with global technology company because I'm under an NDA and I can't say which ones. 16 million buyer on the call. There you
On the
go.
call.
It's worth the wait.
Daniel just had to reboot East Coast internet. So it was actually not Blue Sky, it was a networking issue.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay, so yeah, participating in a study with a global technology company. They're doing some cool tooling around moderation. And yeah, it's just like inspired a lot of ideas that I have around how to just maybe improve ozone, maybe build something to the side of it that helps folks. But yeah, there's just some really interesting ideas about that. And I think they're supposed to be publishing their research at some point and their tooling. And yeah, last, just like, yeah, the way that all this stuff has been going has been like Blacksky is fiscally hosted by Open Source Collective. I've gotten different grants and little funding opportunities that have helped to pay for the servers. Like Boris mentioned, I mean, a lot of the labor that's gone into it is unpaid. Who knows? Maybe one day I'll be able to work on Blacksky and Risky full time. But yeah, I'm interested in general of like figuring out ways to keep the work sustainable in the long run because I don't want to abandon it. That's about it.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, so great. And anyone who's a developer, especially working in Rust, I mean, I could see Nick and Ryan and other people being like, "Oh yeah, I ran into that shredder." That was really great, and yeah, a really great walkthrough. That I mean, I go directly to. I made a bunch of notes. We're in a situation where we need to work on foundational libraries, like never mind the open source part by itself, it's like all this other stuff of having solid libraries. Like you've done a
Mm-hmm.
huge lift in putting this together, and like thank you for sticking with it, really. Like I think what you've done is really, really great. I think you talked a lot about being self-taught or whatever. I have found generally that a lot of the, I'll just say, Web3 components that make up the concept of Blue Sky are very new to developers generally, but it's also kind of the future of like verifiable content. I don't know how much we should even bother explaining it to end users, but like we've got to make a trust shift as part of that. And yeah, super great. Thank you. John, go ahead.
Yeah, great presentation. One of the things I'm really interested in is just your whole approach to community. I think I've mentioned it before. It's so different from what I've ever seen before, and then it's also very complementary with the sort of the networked, more private communities approach of the Fediverse. And so when you were talking about how, it's not just the moderation and Black Sky in general, it's not just for Blue Sky, it's for at Proto in general. Where do you see things going with this? You touched on it like once in one of your early blog posts. Where have you thought more about where things are going with this broader community approach?
Yeah, so I think the closed off community versus an open community. I think there's lots of cultural reasons why a Black Twitter succeeds and like a closed community does not. There's folks like Andre Brock, who's done a lot of like research and talking about that kind of thing, about like why even Black people respond to certain like attempts at bringing them in. Um, like that end up failing. Ultimately, I think if you make it closed, you're gatekeeping. And there are a lot of Black people who are like, how do you know, like, who are you to decide even in the first place, like whether I can be a part of this community? Like, who made you the person in charge? Um, and so that's the reason I kind of like I've always been like I'm interested in how people do things or have done things on the Fediverse, but I know that it's not the like if my cousins wouldn't use it, then it's not something that I'm like interested in. I know what would make them not use it, for example, or be a part of that kind of community.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree that to a first approximation, the Fediverse kind of got shaped in 2017 by trans people and then has been stomped on by cis people ever since then. And so I think a lot of this closed community really comes from or more private community, or really the mix, not the purely closed, but the mix of private and being able to participate more broadly comes from those needs. And so that's why I'm interested in, are there ways to get some kind of hybrid here?
Mm. Yeah, I don't. That's where I'm like, I don't know that a hybrid, for at least my purposes and the kind of community I'm trying to build, I don't know that hybrid is like
Mm-hmm.
what I'm looking for. I know some people are looking for private accounts, and there are some folks that want that. I'm interested in and feel aligned to the idea of these being in public, and then just like what tools can be created. And I think the interesting piece is like if you have the moderation tools that people have responded really strongly to, like having like Blacksky moderation, like that makes folks feel like they can be more public.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm actually not sure of how app protocol all works like once people start having private accounts, but yeah, I'm curious to. Oh, this is like a learning phase. Like I mentioned, like before, I didn't work in any of this stuff before um, Blacksky, but I just go off of like what my intuition and experiences kind of inform. And the different apps. I'm like the second part to your question was like the different apps. So I mean that depends on how the app views end up getting built out, like which apps people build. If they could lend itself to that kind of like algorithm or community, then that's where I would try to plug in. But I know Feedgens are actually like it's a part of the Beasky lexicon. So it also depends on if people start implementing Feedgens in their own lexicons. Um, that will probably inform that. Or they do something different. And um, but the identities that people are tied to are still like a part of that like Blacksky community.
Chat.
Hey, just wanted to kind of follow up on, it's actually kind of related a bit to John's question, I think, too. You talked about adding new mods and the need to add new mods. And I'm just thinking of like, you know, the hashtag, like we keep us safe. And with your strong background in mutual aid organizations, I'm wondering about the governance of things like AutoMod rules. Are those publicly published? Is there a way to get community feedback to add rules or mod rules or even remove rules potentially? Like, how do you, you know, just thinking of like the hierarchy, like the traditional hierarchical way of doing this, where you're like mods are on top and everybody's below. Just have you thought about like how to flatten that hierarchy in the future?
Yeah, that has been I think the tension there is just that if you let people know what the rules are, then they can easily circumvent them. That's where the tricky part of it is. But I would like to make it more. I feel like the my thought at least, and it's maybe a cop out, but like having people be able to report posts to the Blacksky mod service, and not just like I feel like people kind of think of it as like, okay, you encountered you went outside of the Blacksky feed and you encountered like this MAGA person and you want to report them. Uh, an interesting thing that started happening is I've told like if you see something in the Blacksky feed that you don't want, like report that. And now I'm getting like really like there's just new challenges that are coming up. Like people, it's an in community thing, but there's like a African Americans descendant of slave argument against like there's these like kind of diaspora wars and that some people are feel very strongly against like that people have tagged me like don't have this in the feed and some I have to go do research of like what does this flag represent, like what does this thing mean, like do I really feel so strong? Maybe this is just your opinion and your like preference, and it should be a you block this person decision, or should it be that like I don't amplify this content decision, or should it be that I like take stronger levels of moderation? So I've just believed in different layers of the moderation, and then I think there's some parts where people can get involved and it can be collaborative, and there's other parts where it kind of has to be like a bit of a unilateral move.
Yeah. And
But I'm still
in terms of like
figuring that out.
reacting to emergencies, sometimes somebody has to make the decision. You have to make the decision. Is there a process for unmaking those kinds of decisions? Like, what happens if a mistake happens? Sometimes a mistake could happen. Have you had a chance to think about that? Has there ever been a case like that yet?
I will say the other piece to this, because you mentioned the mutual aid organizing, we also encounter this with our mutual aid organizing. Like, there's a core team that has been involved for a long time, and they kind of like have set that vision of what is necessary, and like they're the most involved and most bought in. So we sometimes just make executive decisions off that, but we are coming together as a group. It's not one person. I want to bring more people in. Like the first moderator I brought in was already kind of doing content moderation, just unofficially. And then on the like, has there been? It's happened quietly. So like I kind of like have listened to I watch the Skyline all the time during the curation kind of piece, and so like there was certain content I was removing kind of outright whenever it came up, and then as I saw people kind of say like, hey, this is important, this is a need, like we want to see this more, then I adjusted it to be like less strict. So it's also kind of like, it is still like it's taking in feedback, but I don't ever want people to just feel like they can just hit me up and be like, why is this not in the feed? Because it's also like it starts to cross a boundary. It can get argumentative. Not trying to do all that. But I do want it to be collective and communal.
Cool. Cheers. Okay, I'll pass to Nick.
Yo. So first of all, thanks. You have been working on this for a while, and it's pretty amazing. I feel like I can't really, put into words right now how impactful community growth is to growing networks, especially Blue Sky. And it's hard to prove a negative per se. But would Blue Sky be where it is without people like you, uplifting it? I don't know. That's really hard. Also, a lot of what you've done in like a representative way is stuff that's inspiring to me, and one of the reasons that I decided to build Smoke Signal, right? Like I firmly believe in the whole the concept that community curation and allowing like hyper focused communities to create create those networks and relationships, and then interact with other real people that they know directly in their community, and to have that sort of outreach is what makes a good and healthy social web. I think community curation is really, really difficult, and I appreciated your slide earlier saying that it's about the vibe, like it brings better vibes in. I'm fascinated, especially as we go into the next year, how we can create more scalable structure around curated communities. Invitation systems generally kind of suck, but it's also a pretty tried and true way of making sure that, hey, at least one or two people know this person before they're in sort of this this curated community. And we know that if they do muck up, at least there's the personal relationship there to say, oh, they had a bad week, cut them slack. You know what I mean? Whereas I think the moderation system is kind of black and white. It's like the difference between a phone call versus like a text message, like I think that there's something lost there. So I'm curious how and where you think Blacksky, the community moderation work that you've done, and what like me and others are doing to try to build these communities, how it can scale to create these like hyper local or even large communities online, and still retain that curation and like good vibe check.
That's where like I think that's a really good question. I think that's where that research study that I can't speak too much about was like trying to get at, which is like what would be cool for me to say? Basically, I mean, even just I'll just go off of what I do already. What do I think are the what do I think are the unofficial guidelines and vibe? If you had to put the vibe into words, what would you say the vibe is? What is okay and what is not okay? Like if someone asked me if to define toxicity, what do you want? You say you want a non-toxic community. What counts as toxicity? Uh, you say you want to promote mutual aid, but you don't want to have scammers. So like, how do you define what is mutual aid? What is okay and what is not okay? And so I think it's like if you can build tools that are able to do that check, um, like put your vague rules because like you mentioned, there's black and white rules. You absolutely cannot um, do certain things, right? You absolutely cannot threaten someone or whatever the case may be. But then you may have soft community vibe rules, which is like, don't talk about a specific person, don't make someone a main character. Um, then it's like it feels far more subjective. Um, but yeah, if you can, I mean, what there's all types of there's like maybe LLMs get to a point where they can help with something like this is all I'll say basically. But it's that kind of thing. It's like can you make stuff can you translate your soft rules that don't outright ban someone or just like can you translate those into something that you can put into code as opposed to having someone have to like look at the feed and then make those decisions on the fly, especially because we large language vibe models got to trademark that. It's because we went from 2,000 posts in the feed per day to 25,000. So like I literally cannot look at everything. I used to be able to, but now and it was already kind of catch as catch can back then. Now it's like I can't even catch it for the most part. So there's already people kind of like, and then there's stuff where it's like, all right, well, I like there's someone said today like, oh, Blacksky is really horny, and it's like, well, maybe that works for some people, and it's like maybe you should adjust your moderation settings, or maybe the moderation settings don't cover text-based horniness, and so like there needs to be some tools around that. So yeah, I think it's just a hard problem right now, but
that was fantastic. Someday in the future when the stuff that you can't talk about is open, I want to follow up and like get more thoughts because I think that's such a fascinating and really difficult place to go. Like, how do you scale communities? How do you scale vibes? Like, it's just hard. Some of it's people problems, some of it's technical problems, and
I think there's a piece where I've been noticing it, and part of it is being a very early user and being very engaged at different levels is what I'd like to help cultivate in the wider app protocol and Blue Sky ecosystem. Aspects of it is mutual aid. It's kind of beyond open source in some ways because like the license almost doesn't matter. I'm talking to some co-ops, not Nicks, that are thinking about doing some app protocol stuff. And I think with the mutual aid and some of these other pieces, can we empower users to say that they have agency rather than this trope of that they're fighting against platform owners where they can see themselves as being platform owners, and that's everything from teaching them that they have moderation control, but even more so like, oh great, this is awesome, like I know that I mostly just block because it's like 8 steps for me plus other things, whether I want to display that I'm blocking people in order to do the steps to like contribute to a shared block list, right? So if we're going to do PvE mode, where the environment is the platform, can we get people to understand that they can band together, basically? That's going to be in part tooling, but I think much more of that is in fact vibes based in helping people understand that they are active participants in the platform itself. Right. Let's leave it there. We've gone to 10:20, and we can leave a little bit of time for off the record if there is anything there. Rudy, thank you so much. That was super fantastic. I think that's going to be a great recording for lots of people to look at. We'll got lots of links, and we'll there's more on the chat log. So Thank you so much, Rudy. That was fantastic. Thank you for all of your work. And maybe one more thing. Other than hitting you up on Open Collective, what else can we do to help support you?
Yeah, folks who are devs can contribute to the open issues. Also, just like I mean, like I mentioned, I'm new to the open source world, so if you got guidance and recommendations about how I can like make anything clearer with the to basically just help people get onboarded into helping, let me know. Bigging up the Black Sky feed, and I think I saw like and Black Sky as a project. I think the the coverage in the media around Black Sky has always been when there's something bad that happens, but like as good things happen, there's no follow through or follow up on that. And so yeah, just which is why I end up doing stuff like writing the blog post and telling the story myself. But yeah, just like sharing it with folks, because like I think Jay mentioned that like maybe Blue Sky is like the biggest example of open social media adoption. I feel like Black Sky is the biggest adoption of something like that for Black people, and so I think it's an important work. And yeah, there's content moderation support, but I think we're kind of good on that right now. So it's like dev support, helping to get the story out there, and yeah, donations.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank y'all. Appreciate it.